man adopts 4 black girls thinking he is giving them a new life. His friends laughed him away, not knowing that years later they will be jealous of his life. How did this family defy the odds? And what makes their journey so special? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. Andrew stood at his small apartment window, watching the sunrise paint the sky in gentle shades of pink and orange. His worn medical textbook sat on a shelf nearby, collecting dust, but never forgotten. He reached out and touched one of them, his fingers tracing the familiar spine of Gray's Anatomy. The memory of his last day at medical school still felt fresh, even though it had been 3 years ago. He could picture himself sitting in the dean's office, explaining through tears that he couldn't afford the final year's tuition. His savings had run dry, and no bank would approve another loan. "Sometimes life has other plans for us," he whispered to himself, a saying that Miss Martha, his former caretaker at the orphanage, used to tell him. Andrew walked to his tiny kitchen and made his morning coffee, the rich aroma filling the room. As he waited for it to brew, his eyes drifted to the old photo hanging on his refrigerator, a picture of him at age 7, standing in front of Hope Haven Orphanage with Miss Martha's arm around his shoulders. He remembered that day clearly. It was 2 weeks after his parents had left him there, promising to return but never doing so. Miss Martha had helped him plant a small garden to cheer him up. That simple act of kindness had changed everything for him. Taking a sip of his coffee, Andrew gathered his things for work. His social worker's ID badge caught the morning light as he slipped it into his pocket. It wasn't the medical license he'd dreamed of, but he'd found another way to heal people, not their bodies but their hearts and spirits. The walk to Hope Haven was short, just 6 blocks through the quiet neighborhood. Andrew breathed in the crisp morning air, his footsteps falling into a familiar rhythm. The old brick building came into view, its windows already bright with early morning activity. The sound of children's laughter drifted from the playground. Before climbing the worn stone steps, Andrew paused to look up at the place that had shaped his life. The ivy-covered walls held so many memories, both painful and precious. He'd learned here that family wasn't always about blood relations. Sometimes it was about the people who chose to love you when others had walked away. "Good morning, Mr. Miller," called out Tommy, one of the younger kids, waving frantically from behind the fence. Andrew smiled and waved back, his heart warming at the genuine joy in the boy's face. This was why he came back day after day. This was his way of passing on the gift he'd received in this very place, the gift of hope. He climbed the steps and pulled out his keys, ready to start another day at the place he now called home in a different way, not as a resident, but as someone who could make a difference in children's lives, just as others had done for him. Inside Hope Haven, Andrew's day moved at its usual steady pace. He helped serve breakfast to the children, supervised morning activities, and assisted with paperwork in the small office he shared with other social workers. The walls were covered with children's artwork, bright splashes of crayon and paint that made the cramped space feel warmer. A handmade World's Best Social Worker card, slightly crooked but full of heart, hung prominently beside his desk. Around midday, Margaret, the adoption center coordinator, knocked on his door. Her face carried a worried expression that made Andrew sit up straighter in his chair. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she'd been losing sleep over whatever was troubling her. "Andrew, do you have a moment?" she asked, her voice tight with concern. He nodded, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "Of course. What's on your mind?" Margaret sat down heavily, clutching a folder to her chest as if it contained heartbreaking news. "It's about the quadruplets that came to us last month. They're beautiful, healthy 12-year-old girls, but—" She paused, her eyes downcast, fingers nervously tapping the folder. "We've had 12 couples come through this week alone. Every single one of them chose other babies." Andrew's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "The white kids are being adopted quickly," she said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. "But these 4 little girls, they're black, and no one's even asking about them. Some couples actually walked out when they learned we only had black babies available." She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand, smudging her mascara slightly. "I just don't know what to do, Andrew. They deserve a loving home just as much as any other child. Andrew felt his chest tighten with a familiar ache. He knew too well how it felt to be passed over, to be deemed somehow less worthy of love and family. The memory of his own childhood years, watching other kids leave with their new families, pressed heavily on his heart. "Can I see them?" he asked softly. Mrs. Margaret Thompson nodded, leading him to the nursery wing. The room was peaceful, painted in soft yellows and greens, with gentle classical music playing from a small radio in the corner. In the corner stood 4 identical cribs arranged in a semicircle, each with a handmade mobile spinning slowly overhead. Andrew approached quietly, his heart beginning to race. 4 identical faces looked up at him. Tiny, perfect faces with bright brown eyes and delicate features. One of the babies smiled at him, showing pink gums, and another reached up with tiny fingers. The third cooed softly while the fourth watched him with curious, intelligent eyes. His heart melted instantly. These weren't just cases or statistics. They were 4 precious lives, full of potential and deserving of all the love in the world. Standing there, looking at their innocent faces, Andrew felt something shift inside him, though he couldn't quite name what it was yet. But deep down, he knew this moment would change everything. "Margaret," Andrew said, turning to Mrs. Thompson with determination in his voice, "I promise you, we'll find these girls their perfect family. Every child deserves that chance." His hands gripped the edge of his desk as he spoke, knuckles whitening with conviction. Margaret's eyes softened with hope, and she adjusted her cardigan, a habit she'd developed over her 15 years at the orphanage. "I know if anyone can help, it's you, Andrew. You've always had a way of seeing the beauty in every child." Later that day, Andrew walked to the small clothing shop downtown, the bell above the door chiming as he entered. His wallet felt light, his social worker's salary barely covered his basic needs, but he knew exactly how he wanted to spend his savings. Inside the store, past racks of children's clothes, he found what he was looking for: 4 identical blue dresses, delicate and pretty with small white flowers embroidered around the collars. The soft cotton fabric felt perfect against his fingers. The shopkeeper, an elderly woman with kind eyes, wrapped each dress carefully in tissue paper as Andrew counted out the bills. It was nearly half his monthly savings, but seeing those dresses made his heart light. He'd skip a few lunches this month, but it would be worth it. Back at the orphanage, Miss Margaret helped dress each girl in their new blue dresses, carefully guiding tiny arms through sleeves and buttoning the backs with gentle fingers. They looked like little angels, their dark skin glowing against the soft blue fabric, their eyes bright with curiosity. "There you go," he said, straightening the last tiny collar with careful attention. "Now when families come to visit, you'll give them your biggest smiles, won't you?" The next morning dawned bright and clear, with golden sunlight streaming through the windows of the adoption center. Andrew helped the quadruplets get ready with meticulous care, carefully smoothing their matching blue dresses and arranging their dark, curly hair with colorful ribbons. His gentle hands tied each bow perfectly, making sure the satin strips were even and neat, determined that they all looked their absolute best. The girls stood together by the entrance of the adoption center, their small hands clasped together tightly, creating a picture of innocence and hope that made his heart swell with affection. "Remember what we practiced?" Andrew knelt beside them, adjusting a slightly crooked ribbon with careful fingers. "Big smiles, okay? Just be yourselves." The first couple arrived precisely at 9:15. They were well-dressed and polished, the woman in an expensive floral dress and pearl necklace, and the man in crisp pressed khakis and a blue button-down shirt. Andrew's heart lifted with cautious optimism as the girls broke into their practiced greeting, their sweet voices ringing out in perfect unison. "Good morning." But the couple barely glanced their way, their expressions distant and dismissive. The woman's eyes slid past them as if they were invisible, while the man placed his hand on his wife's back and steered her toward another part of the center, where a fair-haired toddler played with wooden blocks. Andrew felt the sting of rejection as sharply as if it were directed at him personally, his chest tightening with familiar pain. Throughout the long morning, the scene repeated itself again and again. Couple after couple came through the heavy wooden doors, and each time, The girls bravely offered their cheerful greetings with unwavering hope. Each time they were met with awkward glances, uncomfortable shuffling, or complete indifference. By noon, their little shoulders had begun to droop noticeably, and their once bright smiles had dimmed like fading stars. Andrew watched them trying so hard, his heart breaking a little more with each rejection they endured. During a quiet moment when no visitors were present, he slipped away to the kitchen and returned with a special treat, a plate of warm chocolate chip cookies that filled the air with their comforting aroma, and small cups of cold milk. "Come here, sweethearts," he called softly, leading them to their favorite corner with the comfortable cushions and well-worn stuffed animals. As they settled around him in a tight circle, he handed out the still warm cookies. "You did so well today. I'm very proud of you all." One of the girls looked up at him with large brown eyes, cookie crumbs dotting her chin. "Nobody wants us," she said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. Andrew gently wiped her chin with a paper napkin, his touch tender and reassuring. "Sometimes people don't know what they're missing," he said, his voice warm and steady. "But that's okay, because tomorrow is a new day and we'll try again. Sometimes the best things in life take a little patience and extra love." He spent the rest of their break telling them funny stories about his own childhood mishaps and making them giggle with silly faces, watching with relief as the disappointment slowly faded from their eyes. When their cookies were finished and the last drops of milk were gone, he gave each girl a gentle, protective hug. "Ready to try again tomorrow?" They nodded bravely, their spirits lifted by his encouragement, the sweet treats, and the unconditional love that wrapped around them like a warm blanket. Next morning, Andrew watched from his worn oak desk as the quadruplets took their usual position by the door, their blue dresses neat and pressed, their hair carefully braided into matching patterns. His heart squeezed with a mixture of hope and anxiety as he observed their brave faces, noting how they stood just a little straighter today. The first couple of the day walked in, a young pair holding hands and wearing matching wedding bands that caught the sunlight. The girls' voices rang out clear and sweet. "Good morning." But like so many before them, the couple's eyes skimmed past the girls as if they were part of the wallpaper, heading straight for a blonde toddler playing with wooden blocks in the corner. Day after day, the pattern continued, wearing down their resolve bit by bit. Each morning, Andrew would help the girls prepare, straightening their dresses and checking their ribbons with gentle, encouraging words. Each day, they would stand faithfully by the door, their small faces bright with hope, and their hands clasped together for strength. And each day, that hope would slowly fade like morning mist, as family after family walked past them without a second glance. Andrew tried his best to keep their spirits up, his own heart aching for them. "Sometimes the best things take time," he would say, bringing them homemade chocolate chip cookies or telling them stories about brave princesses who never gave up. But he could see the toll it was taking. Their smiles became more forced, their shoulders slightly more hunched, their eyes a little less bright with each passing rejection. On the third day, after watching yet another couple walk past without acknowledgement, this time barely bothering to hide their dismissive glances, one of the girls, the smallest of the four, turned to Andrew with tears welling in her dark eyes. "Mr. Andrew," she whispered, her lower lip trembling and her small hands clenched into fists, "will we ever be good enough?" Before he could respond, she burst into tears and ran down the hallway, her patent leather shoes clicking against the floor, her sisters watching helplessly with matching expressions of distress. Andrew's heart shattered as he started to follow her, his own eyes stinging with unshed tears. Suddenly, a deep voice spoke from behind him. "Excuse me," it said, causing Andrew to turn around. A tall man stood there in a crisp business suit, his expression kind but determined, crow's feet crinkling at the corners of his eyes. "I saw 4 quadruplets here and I want to adopt them." Andrew turned to face the voice, his eyes meeting those of a well-dressed man in his 50s. The man's silver-streaked hair was neatly combed, and his tailored suit spoke of success and stability. "I'm Matthew Jenkins," the man said, extending his hand with a warm smile. "I own several restaurants in the area, and I couldn't help but notice these wonderful girls over the past few days. Andrew shook his hand, hope blooming in his chest. "The girls are wonderful," he agreed, his voice thick with emotion. "They're incredibly sweet and bright." Mr. Jenkins nodded, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "I've been looking to expand my family, and when I saw them..." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "Well, I believe I could give them the life they deserve. A good education, a loving home, everything they need to thrive." The three girls who remained by the door watched the exchange with wide eyes, while Margaret quickly went to fetch their sister who had run away. When all four were gathered, Mr. Jenkins knelt down to their level. "Hello, girls," he said softly. "Would you like to come live with me? I have a big house with a beautiful garden where you can play." The girls exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from uncertainty to cautious excitement. The smallest one, who had been crying earlier, stepped forward. "Really?" she asked in a tiny voice. "Really," Mr. Jenkins confirmed with a gentle smile. That evening, Margaret efficiently handled the paperwork, her practiced hands moving swiftly through the documents while Mr. Jenkins signed each page. Andrew watched the process with a mixture of joy and wistfulness, his heart both lifting and aching as the reality set in. The girls would finally have a home. As Mr. Jenkins prepared to leave with the girls, each carrying their small bags of belongings, they turned to Andrew. One by one, they hugged him tightly, their blue dresses rustling as they moved. "Thank you, Mr. Andrew," they chorused, their faces bright with hope. Andrew watched as they walked away, their small hands clasped in Mr. Jenkins's larger ones, their matching blue dresses swaying as they moved. They turned back one last time to wave goodbye, and Andrew waved back, his heart full. He had done it. He had helped them find a family, someone who would give them the love and care they deserved. A few days later, Andrew sat at his desk in the orphanage, staring at his phone. The screen showed 5 failed attempts to reach Mr. Jenkins over the past few days. Each time, the conversations had been brief and unsatisfying, leaving him with more questions than answers. "Oh, they're fine, just adjusting," Mr. Jenkins had said yesterday, his voice oddly distant and clipped. "Too busy to talk now. You understand how it is with new children." Something in Andrew's gut twisted, a familiar sensation that had kept him up the past few nights. He'd spent enough time with those girls to know their routines, their little habits, the way they'd beg for just 5 more minutes of story time before bed. They were chatterboxes who loved sharing every detail of their day, from what they had for breakfast to which clouds looked like bunnies. The silence felt wrong, like a song playing off-key. Running his hands through his disheveled hair, Andrew pushed back from his desk and walked down the hallway to Margaret's office. The familiar creak of the floorboards echoed his footsteps as he knocked on her door, each sound matching the nervous rhythm of his heart. "Come in," Margaret called, her voice warm and steady as always. Andrew stepped inside, fidgeting with his sleeve, a habit he'd developed during his own days as an orphan. "Margaret, I can't shake this feeling about the girls. Something doesn't feel right. It's like an alarm bell going off in my head." Margaret looked up from her paperwork, her kind eyes crinkling with concern behind her reading glasses. "What do you mean?" "Mr. Jenkins barely answers my calls. When he does, he rushes off the phone like he can't wait to end the conversation. I haven't heard the girls' voices once." Andrew paced the small office, his shoes wearing an invisible path in the carpet. "I know I should be happy they found a home, but something feels off." "Andrew," Margaret said gently, setting down her pen. "New adoptive parents often need time to bond with their children. Maybe Mr. Jenkins is just focused on helping them settle in. Remember how overwhelming those first few days can be." Andrew nodded, but his shoulders remained tense, carrying the weight of his worry. "You're probably right. I care about those girls so much. They deserve the world." "I know you do." Margaret smiled warmly, her expression softening. "That's what makes you special, Andrew. But try not to worry too much. Give them time to adjust." But as Andrew walked back to his desk, the unease only grew stronger, like a shadow stretching longer in the afternoon sun. He grabbed his jacket from the coat rack, making a decision. Mr. Jenkins owned a restaurant in town. Surely it wouldn't hurt to stop by and check things out just to put his mind at ease. He needed to see their faces, hear their laughs, know they were truly happy. "I'm heading into town for a bit," he called to Margaret as he passed her office again, trying to keep his voice casual. The autumn air was crisp as Andrew stepped outside, leaves crunching beneath his feet, his steps purposeful as he headed toward the bus stop. He had to know if his instincts were right or if he was just being overprotective. Either way, he wouldn't rest until he saw those girls were truly okay, safe and sound in their new home. An hour later, he was standing right in front of Mr. Jenkins' restaurant. Andrew settled into a corner booth at Jenkins' family restaurant, his fingers drumming nervously on the laminated menu. The place was busy for a weekday afternoon, filled with the clatter of dishes and murmured conversations. He ordered a simple bowl of soup, his appetite secondary to the real reason he was here. His heart nearly stopped when he saw her. One of the quadruplets, Sarah, approached his table carrying a tray that looked too heavy for her small frame. Her once bright eyes were tired, and her hair was hastily pulled back. Instead of the blue dress he'd given her, she wore a stained apron over worn clothes that seemed too big for her. "Sarah?" he whispered, his voice catching in his throat. The girl's eyes widened in recognition and she almost dropped the tray. "Mr. Andrew." Her voice was barely audible as she set down his soup with trembling hands. She glanced nervously over her shoulder toward the kitchen. "Are you okay? Where are your sisters?" Andrew leaned forward, keeping his voice low. Sarah's lower lip quivered. "We all work here. Rachel and Lucy are washing dishes. Emma's sweeping the back." She wrung her hands in her apron. "Mr. Jenkins makes us work all day. We haven't played since we got here. We're so tired, Mr. Andrew." Hot anger rose in Andrew's chest like a tide. He spotted Mr. Jenkins emerging from the kitchen, his sleeves rolled up, looking pleased with himself as he surveyed his busy restaurant. Andrew stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. "Mr. Jenkins," he called out, his voice steady despite his rage. "We need to talk, now." Jenkins approached with an artificial smile. "Andrew, how did you get here?" "What are you doing to these girls?" Andrew demanded, gesturing to Sarah, who had shrunk back against a nearby table. "They're children, not servants." Jenkins's smile disappeared. "They're earning their keep," he said coldly. "What did you expect? That I'd just feed and clothe 4 kids out of the goodness of my heart? That's exactly what adoption means." Andrew's voice rose, drawing attention from nearby tables. Jenkins sneered. "Well, then you're more naive than I thought. I needed help running this place and hiring actual employees costs too much. These girls are getting room and board. They should be grateful." Andrew's hand shook as he pulled out his phone. "You're exploiting children. I'm calling the authorities right now." Andrew's fingers were already dialing, his eyes never leaving Jenkins's face as he reported the child labor violation to the authorities. Sarah watched from nearby, hope beginning to spark in her tired eyes. The wail of police sirens filled the crisp afternoon air as 3 patrol cars pulled up outside Jenkins's family restaurant, their red and blue lights reflecting off the storefront windows. Customers stopped eating mid-bite, watching wide-eyed as uniformed officers entered the establishment with purposeful strides. Mr. Jenkins's face turned ghostly pale as they approached him, his usual confident demeanor crumbling as they read him his rights while securing handcuffs around his trembling wrists. "Child labor is a serious offense, sir," one officer stated firmly, his badge glinting in the fluorescent lighting as he led Jenkins toward the door. "You'll have plenty of time to explain yourself down at the station. We have evidence of multiple violations." The other 3 girls emerged hesitantly from the back kitchen, their small shoes squeaking against the tile floor as they huddled together with Sarah, their aprons still dusted with flour. Their small frames trembled like leaves in the wind, and Andrew's heart ached deeply at the sight of their frightened faces. "It's okay now," he said softly, kneeling down to their level and opening his arms wide. "You're safe. No one's going to make you work like that ever again. I promise." Emma, the youngest by a few minutes, burst into tears and threw herself into his arms, her small body shaking with sobs. Her sisters followed quickly after, and soon Andrew was holding all 4 of them as they cried, their tears soaking into his shirt. We thought maybe that's just how it was supposed to be," Mary whispered between hiccuping sobs, her voice tiny and uncertain. "That maybe we had to earn the right to be loved." Andrew's throat tightened with emotion, and he had to blink back his own tears. "No, sweethearts. Love isn't something you earn. It's something you deserve, just by being you. You're precious exactly as you are." A female officer with kind eyes approached gently, her footsteps deliberately slow. "We'll need to take them back to the orphanage now. We'll need statements from everyone, but that can wait until tomorrow. They've been through enough today." As they walked toward the waiting police car, little Lucy tugged anxiously at Andrew's sleeve, her fingers gripping the fabric tightly. "Will you come with us? We're scared." "Of course I will," Andrew replied, his voice thick with emotion and determination. He helped them into the back seat of the patrol car one by one, his mind heavy with guilt and regret. He should have trusted his instincts sooner, should have checked on them earlier, should have seen through the facade. The signs had been there all along. Jenkins' suspiciously quick adoption, his evasive answers about the girl's schooling, his too smooth manner and practiced charm. The drive back to the orphanage was quiet, broken only by occasional sniffles from the girls and the soft hum of the car's engine. Andrew held their small hands in his, promising himself he would make this right somehow. These precious children deserved so much better than what they'd been through, and he was determined to ensure they would never know such cruelty again. Back at the orphanage, Margaret pulled Andrew aside while the girls settled into their old room, their blue dresses now wrinkled and stained from their ordeal at the restaurant. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the hallway windows, making the moment feel even heavier. "Andrew," Margaret said softly, her eyes filled with sadness, her weathered hands clasping and unclasping with nervous energy. "We both know why this keeps happening. These beautiful girls are being passed over, exploited and hurt simply because of the color of their skin. It's a cruel reality they're facing far too young. I've seen it happen too many times before." The truth of her words hit Andrew like a physical blow. He pressed his hand against the wall to steady himself, his shoulders slumping under the weight of this harsh reality. All the rejections, the sideways glances, the way parents had hurried past them. It wasn't just coincidence. It was prejudice, plain and simple. The realization made his stomach churn. He walked into the girls' room where they sat huddled together on one of the small beds, their matching dresses creating a sea of rumpled blue fabric. Their eyes, still red from crying, looked up at him with such trust that it made his heart ache. A stuffed bear lay forgotten on the floor, a silent witness to their pain. "Come here," he said, opening his arms wide. They rushed to him immediately, nearly knocking him off balance, and he gathered them close, fighting back his own tears. The familiar scent of their shampoo mixed with the saltiness of their tears. "Listen to me, all of you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You are perfect exactly as you are. Your skin is beautiful. Your hearts are beautiful. There is absolutely nothing wrong with you. The problem lies with people who can't see past their own prejudice to recognize how amazing you are. Don't let anyone make you think differently." Sarah buried her face in his shirt, her small fingers clutching the fabric. "But why don't they want us?" "Because they're blind," Andrew replied, holding them tighter, feeling their hearts beating against his chest. "They're blind to your kindness, your strength, your wonderful spirits. But I see you. I see how special each of you is. I see the way you help each other, the way you laugh together, how brave you are." As they clung to him, their small bodies shaking with sobs, something shifted in Andrew's heart. The love he felt for these girls wasn't just compassion anymore. It was deeper, more profound. It was the kind of love that made him want to move mountains, to reshape the world into a kinder place for them. It was the kind of love that kept him awake at night, wondering how to protect them from life's cruelties. Looking at their precious faces, he realized that perhaps he had been blind too, blind to what had been right in front of him all along. These weren't just any children he wanted to help. They were his children. The thought both terrified and energized him. Could he, a single man with limited means, really provide the home these girls deserved? The question echoed in his mind as he held them close, knowing that sometimes the most important answers come from the heart rather than the head. That night, in his modest one-bedroom apartment, Andrew sat at his small kitchen table, the only light coming from a worn desk lamp that cast long shadows across the room. His coffee had gone cold, forgotten as his mind raced with possibilities and fears. The walls, decorated with just a few framed photos from his years at the orphanage, seemed to watch him silently as he wrestled with the biggest decision of his life. The ticking of the wall clock echoed in the quiet space, marking each moment of his contemplation. "Could I really be their father?" he whispered to himself, running his fingers through his hair, his hands trembling slightly. His bank statement lay open before him, the numbers seeming smaller than ever, almost mocking his dreams. His social worker's salary wasn't much, barely enough for his own modest lifestyle, and raising 4 girls would mean stretching every dollar to its limit. He'd need to pick up extra shifts, maybe even look for additional work. He glanced around his apartment. It would need to change completely. The small living room would have to become a bedroom for the girls, with bunk beds squeezed into every available space. He'd need to sleep on the couch, though it was old and lumpy. They'd need clothes, school supplies, food, medical care. The list seemed endless, growing longer with each passing minute. Memories of his own childhood flooded back, the loneliness of watching other kids leave with their new families, the ache of wondering why nobody chose him, the way his heart would jump hopefully every time prospective parents visited. He remembered promising himself that if he ever had the chance, he'd make sure no child felt that way. That promise had guided his entire life, leading him to social work. "They deserve so much more than this," Andrew muttered, looking at his humble surroundings, the worn carpet, the secondhand furniture, the cramped spaces. But then he remembered their faces, their trust in him, their resilience despite everything they'd been through. He thought of their small acts of kindness toward each other, the way they shared everything without complaint. They didn't need luxury. They needed love, stability, and someone who would fight for them no matter what. His eyes fell on an old photo of himself as a child at the orphanage, standing alone during a Christmas celebration. The sadness in that young boy's eyes spoke volumes about years of disappointment and longing. He picked up the frame, touching it gently, feeling the cool glass beneath his fingertips. "They won't have to feel that way," he said firmly, his voice growing stronger. "Not if I can help it." The worries were still there. The financial struggles, the challenges of being a single father, the massive responsibility of raising 4 children. Each concern weighed heavily, but somehow they seemed less important now. His heart had already made the decision, his head was just catching up. The girls' faces, their hopes, their potential. It all mattered more than his fears. Standing up from the table, Andrew felt lighter than he had in days, as if a great weight had lifted from his shoulders. The path ahead would be difficult, filled with challenges he couldn't even imagine yet, but he knew it was right. He grabbed his jacket from the hook by the door, his movements filled with purpose and newfound energy. It was time to head back to the orphanage. Time to make these girls his daughters, to give them the family they deserved, and maybe, just maybe, find the family he'd always wanted too. Andrew's footsteps echoed through the familiar hallways of the orphanage as he made his way to Margaret's office. His heart was pounding, but his resolve was firm. Margaret looked up from her desk, her kind eyes crinkling with understanding as he shared his decision. "I want to adopt them, Margaret, all 4 of them," he said, his voice steady despite his nerves. Margaret's face softened. "I had a feeling you'd come to this decision, Andrew. But are you sure?" Andrew took a deep breath, his gaze unwavering. "Yes, Margaret. They deserve a home, and I can give them that." Margaret leaned forward, her expression both warm and cautious. "I know your heart, Andrew, but raising 4 girls alone, especially considering the challenges they might face, isn't going to be easy." Andrew nodded, bracing himself for what she might say next. "I know it's a big responsibility," he replied, his voice steady. But they need someone who'll fight for them, who'll see them for who they are. I want to be that person. Margaret's eyes softened even more. They'll need a lot of love, support, and patience. And there will be people who don't understand or approve. Andrew looked down briefly, then met her gaze again with quiet determination. I've been in their shoes, Margaret, feeling like no one wants you, like you're invisible. I won't let them grow up feeling that way. Not while I can do something about it. Margaret smiled gently, admiration shining in her eyes. You're a good man, Andrew. If anyone can give them what they need, it's you. But just remember, they'll test you, and there may be times you'll question this choice. Hours later, with preliminary forms completed, Andrew gathered the girls in the playroom. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting warm patches on the worn carpet where toys lay scattered. The 4 girls sat in a semicircle before him, their matching blue dresses slightly wrinkled from play. Andrew knelt down to their level, his hand slightly shaking as he looked into their expectant faces. Girls, he began softly, I want to ask you something very important. He took a deep breath. Would you like to come live with me? I'd like to be your father. For a moment, silence filled the room. The girls' eyes widened, looking at each other as if to confirm they'd heard correctly. Then, slowly, their faces transformed with dawning joy. Really? The youngest whispered, her voice trembling with hope. Really? Andrew confirmed, his own eyes growing misty. The girls launched themselves at him, tiny arms wrapping around his neck in a group hug that nearly knocked him over. Their laughter, pure and beautiful, filled the room. As they moved the girls' few belongings into his apartment, Andrew couldn't help but notice the whispers and looks from some of his colleagues. He's throwing his life away, one muttered. 4 kids at his age? He'll be in debt forever. Poor guy doesn't know what he's getting into, another commented, shaking their head. Each word stung, but when Andrew looked at his girls arranging their small collection of toys in their new home, their faces glowing with happiness, the criticism faded away. His tiny apartment was already transforming. Colorful drawings appeared on the refrigerator, giggles echoed off the walls, and 4 pairs of small shoes lined up neatly by the door. As they walked into their new home together, one of the girls slipped her small hand into his. Are you really our daddy now? She asked, looking up at him with trust in her eyes. Andrew squeezed her hand gently. Yes, sweetheart, I really am. After taking the girls to his small apartment, the sound of their excited chatter brought warmth to his heart, but his mind was heavy with worry. Bills, groceries, school supplies, clothes. The list of expenses seemed endless, growing longer with each passing day. He pulled out his worn leather wallet, counting the meager bills inside for the 3rd time that evening. His social worker's salary had been enough when he lived alone, but now there were 5 mouths to feed. The girls deserved so much more than just getting by. They deserved new clothes instead of hand-me-downs, fresh school supplies, and maybe even those art classes they'd been eyeing. Maybe I could pick up some evening shifts at the grocery store, he muttered to himself, scribbling numbers on a notepad, or weekend work at the diner. His pen moved quickly as he calculated potential earnings against their needs, the numbers dancing before his tired eyes as he tried to make them add up differently. The quiet padding of small feet made him look up. All 4 girls stood before him, their expressions serious, still wearing their matching second-hand dresses from that morning. Daddy, one of them spoke up, twisting the hem of her dress nervously. We saw you looking worried. We can help, another chimed in, her eyes bright with determination. Mrs. Peterson at the corner store said she needs someone to sweep her sidewalk. And we can deliver newspapers, the 3rd added eagerly, bouncing on her toes. Tommy from school does it, and he says it's easy. Or help clean houses, the 4th suggested, nodding wisely. Andrew's heart squeezed tight in his chest. These precious girls, who had already faced so much hardship, were offering to work just to make his burden lighter. He set aside his notepad and opened his arms wide, gathering them all in a warm embrace, breathing in the sweet scent of their shampoo. Listen to me, my sweet girls, he said firmly but gently, looking into each pair of earnest eyes. "Your only job right now is to study hard and have a good childhood. I'm your father now and I'll handle everything else." That's what parents do. "But," one started to protest, her lower lip trembling slightly. "No buts," Andrew said, his voice soft but determined. "You focus on your schoolwork and being kids. That's what will make me happiest. You're already doing so well in school. That's the best help you can give me." Looking into their concerned faces, he smiled reassuringly, trying to pour all his love and confidence into that single expression. "I promise you, everything will be fine. We're a family now, and I'll make sure you have everything you need. That's what families do for each other." The girls hugged him tighter, their small arms wrapping around him from all sides, and Andrew held them close, silently vowing to do whatever it took to give them the opportunities they deserved, even if it meant working every spare hour he had. Their life went on and weeks turned into years. With some savings, Andrew enrolled his girls into a school nearby. The morning sun cast long shadows across the school's brick facade as Andrew walked hand in hand with his daughters toward their first day of class. The girls wore matching plaid uniforms, their backpacks nearly as big as they were, filled with fresh notebooks and pencils he'd carefully selected from the school supply list. Each backpack had a small charm, a gift he'd given them to help ease their nerves. "Remember what we practiced?" Andrew asked, kneeling to straighten their collars one last time. His gentle fingers smoothed down each pleat with care. "Head up, smile bright. And be ourselves." They finished in unison, giggling. Their matching braids swayed as they bounced on their toes with nervous energy. As they approached the school entrance, the morning bustle of parents and children suddenly seemed to quiet. Andrew felt the weight of stares and heard the not-so-subtle whispers. The cheerful morning atmosphere turned thick with tension. Is he really their father? What kind of white man would adopt 4 black kids? A woman in designer sunglasses muttered to another parent, clutching her coffee cup tightly. "Such a shame," came another whisper. "Taking on 4 at once? He's ruining his life. No single man can handle that." "Those poor girls," someone else added, shaking their head. "What kind of life can he give them? They'll never have what they need." Andrew's jaw tightened, but he kept his expression calm and warm for his daughter's sake. He noticed one of the girls grip his hand tighter, her small fingers trembling slightly against his palm. Another daughter pressed closer to his side. Inside the classroom, the teacher's smile seemed forced as she assigned seats to the quadruplets, spreading them apart despite their nervous glances at each other. Other children stared openly, some moving their desks slightly away, creating small islands of isolation around each girl. "Girls," Andrew said softly, gathering them close one last time before he had to leave. He could smell the fresh shampoo from their morning showers. "Remember what makes you special. You're smart, you're kind, and you have each other. And you have me. Always. No matter what." They nodded bravely, though he could see the uncertainty in their eyes. One by one, they took their seats, pulling out their notebooks with determined focus, their small shoulders squared against the weight of their classmates' stares. Walking back through the hallway, Andrew heard more whispers, saw more judgmental glances. His heart ached knowing his girls would face these attitudes daily, but pride swelled in his chest too. He'd seen their strength already, in the orphanage, through the failed adoption attempts, and now here. They were survivors, just like him, with a resilience that ran bone deep. At the school entrance, he paused for a moment, straightening his shoulders. The morning crowd of parents was still there, still whispering, still staring. Some quickly looked away when he met their eyes, but Andrew held his head high, knowing that every sacrifice, every challenge, every disapproving look was worth it for the 4 precious souls he now called his daughters. Their future was worth any price. His days soon became a blur of early mornings and late nights, with Andrew juggling 3, sometimes 4 jobs, anything to keep the girls clothed, fed, and enrolled in school. He took on hours at the local grocery store, cleaned office buildings at night, and even worked as a part-time handyman on weekends. He was exhausted, often catching only a few hours of sleep each night, But the thought of the girls' smiles and their hopeful futures kept him going. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, with Andrew pouring every ounce of his strength into giving his daughters a stable life. 6 months later, one evening, as he was finishing a late shift, one of the girls ran up to him as he walked through the door. "Dad," she said excitedly, "you have to come to our parent-teacher meeting tomorrow." Andrew's heart swelled, though he felt a twinge of nervousness. He was no stranger to curious stares and whispered judgments, but for the girls, he would face anything. The next morning, after another night of barely any sleep, he put on his only tie and freshly pressed shirt and made his way to the school. At the school entrance, he paused for a moment, straightening his shoulders. The morning crowd of parents was still there, still whispering, still staring. Some quickly looked away when he met their eyes. Andrew shifted in the small classroom chair, feeling out of place among the other parents at the PTM. The room buzzed with quiet conversations and occasional glances in his direction, making him feel like an exhibit at a zoo. He fidgeted with his worn tie, the only one he owned, and smoothed down his freshly pressed shirt, which still carried the faint scent of the discount store starch he'd used that morning. "Did you hear?" a woman whispered nearby, her designer purse perched on her knee. "He's the one who adopted all 4 of them. What was he thinking? One child is challenging enough." "Single father, 4 girls?" another parent added, shaking her head disapprovingly. "They can't possibly be getting proper guidance. Children need a mother's touch." Andrew's cheeks burned, but he kept his eyes forward as the first teacher began speaking. Ms. Rose, who taught mathematics, cleared her throat and adjusted her wire-rimmed glasses, the fluorescent lights glinting off the frames. "I'd like to discuss the remarkable progress of your girls," she announced, her voice carrying authority and warmth. "All 4 have shown exceptional aptitude for mathematics. Sarah, in particular, solved an advanced problem that even 6th graders struggle with. She found an elegant solution that impressed even me." The whispers died down, replaced by attentive silence. Andrew's heart swelled with pride, his earlier discomfort momentarily forgotten. "In my English class," Mr. Peters added, standing up from his desk at the front, "Emma's creative writing stands out. Her stories show remarkable depth for her age. Last week, she wrote a beautiful piece about family that moved several of us to tears." One by one, the teachers praised his daughters, their perfect attendance despite winter colds and rainy days, their eagerness to help classmates who struggled with lessons, their unfailing politeness and determination in the face of challenges. With each commendation, Andrew sat straighter, pride replacing his earlier nervousness, his tie forgotten. He noticed the change in the room. The judgmental stares transformed into looks of grudging respect, then genuine admiration. The parent who had whispered earlier now looked embarrassed, studying her manicured hands in her lap, her designer purse forgotten. "And Rachel and Lucy," their science teacher beamed, her enthusiasm infectious, "worked together to create an outstanding project about the solar system. Their presentation was so engaging that we've displayed it in the hallway. They even added working lights to show the orbital paths." As the meeting concluded, Andrew heard different kinds of whispers floating through the air. "They must study very hard at home. Did you see their project? Incredible detail. My son can't stop talking about it. Those girls are going places. He must be doing something right." The classroom door burst open with a bang, and 4 excited faces appeared, their cheeks flushed from running. "Daddy!" they called in unison, rushing toward him with paper-filled folders and bright smiles that lit up their entire faces. Andrew gathered them close, their achievements clutched in small hands, their faces glowing with accomplishment and love. In that moment, every doubtful comment, every sacrifice, every extra shift he'd worked at the social services office felt completely worth it. These girls weren't just succeeding, they were thriving. One day, Andrew was heading to an early morning shift after dropping the girls to school. A familiar voice cut through his thoughts. "Andrew? Andrew Miller. Is that you?" He turned to see Jacob Chen, his old college roommate, standing outside the corner cafe. Jacob looked exactly like his social media photos. Designer suit, expensive watch, and that confident smile that always seemed to say he knew something others didn't. His perfectly styled hair hadn't changed since their university days. "Jacob, it's been years," Andrew smiled, accepting his old friend's handshake. The grip was firm, businesslike, so different from the casual high fives they used to share in their dorm room. "Join me for coffee?" "My treat," Jacob insisted, already steering them toward the cafe door with the same take-charge attitude he'd always had. "I want to hear what you've been up to." They settled into a quiet corner booth, steam rising from their cups. Jacob stirred his artisanal brew while Andrew wrapped his hands around his simple black coffee. The cafe buzzed with morning commuters, their conversations creating a gentle backdrop. "So fill me in," Jacob leaned back, adjusting his gold cufflinks. "Still doing that social work thing?" Andrew nodded, then found himself sharing the story of the quadruplets, his voice warming as he described their recent achievements at school. His eyes lit up as he mentioned their science fair project. Jacob's laughter cut him short, sharp and dismissive. "Wait, you actually adopted 4 kids? By yourself?" He shook his head, amusement dancing in his eyes. "Man, what are you doing with your life? You're throwing away your potential. We both know you were top of our pre-med class." Andrew's coffee suddenly tasted bitter. His fingers tightened around the ceramic mug. "They needed a home, Jacob." "Look at me." Jacob gestured to his expensive suit, straightening his silk tie. "I've got my own tech consulting firm now. 3 vacation homes. Complete freedom. That could have been you too, you know." He pulled out a business card from a sleek leather wallet, sliding it across the table. "I could use someone like you. Starting salary would triple what you're making now." The card felt heavy in Andrew's hand, the embossed letters catching the morning light. "I appreciate the offer, but..." "Think about it," Jacob interrupted, checking his Rolex. "Stop playing savior and start living for yourself. These kids, they're not even yours. Why sacrifice everything for them?" Andrew's chest tightened, but he kept his voice steady. "I should get to work," he said quietly, standing up. "It was good seeing you, Jacob." "The offer stands," Jacob called after him as Andrew headed for the door, leaving his half-finished coffee behind. The bell above the door chimed as he stepped out into the morning air. Walking to his office, Andrew's steps felt heavier than usual, Jacob's words echoing in his mind. The weight of the business card seemed to burn in his pocket. Time flowed like a gentle river, carrying Andrew and his daughters through seasons of growth and change. The tiny apartment that once felt cramped now buzzed with the energy of 4 teenage girls, their school certificates and achievement ribbons decorating the walls like proud badges of their journey. Science fair trophies lined the windowsills, and college brochures filled every available surface. Sarah, the eldest by minutes, had inherited Andrew's quiet determination. Emma's quick wit matched her sister Lucy's analytical mind, while Rachel's compassionate nature reminded everyone of their father. Together, they formed a tight unit, supporting each other through every challenge, from late-night study sessions to personal setbacks. "Dad, guess what?" Sarah burst through the door one afternoon, waving a letter, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "I got the Matthews Science Scholarship." Her sisters followed, each clutching similar envelopes, their faces glowing with achievement. Andrew looked up from his worn armchair, his eyes bright with pride. The scholarship announcements had become frequent visitors to their home, each one easing the weight of financial worry from his shoulders. His daughter's determination reminded him of his own younger days, filled with similar dreams and aspirations. During dinner, gathered around their small table, conversations often turned to Andrew's past. "Tell us again about your medical school days," Sarah would ask, spooning up her soup, her eyes eager for details about her father's journey. Andrew would share stories of his interrupted dreams, not with bitterness, but with hope. "I made it to my final year," he'd say, running a hand through his graying hair, "before the money ran out. But everything happens for a reason." His gentle smile always carried the wisdom of acceptance. One evening, as they helped clean the kitchen, Emma spoke up. "Dad, we've been talking." The other girls gathered closer, forming a circle around him. "We're all going to become doctors. Together, we'll open that clinic you always dreamed about." Andrew paused, dish towel in hand, touched by their declaration. His heart swelled with emotion. Girls, you don't have to— We want to, Lucy interrupted gently, placing her hand on his arm. You gave up your dream to give us a future. Now we want to make that dream come true. For all of us. Her sisters nodded in unified agreement. Standing in the crowded auditorium on graduation day, Andrew watched his daughters cross the stage one by one, their honors cords gleaming under the lights. Tears welled in his eyes as he remembered those 4 little girls in blue dresses waiting by the orphanage door. Now they stood tall and confident, their futures bright with promise, their determination unshakable. Years of dedicated study culminated in a moment Andrew never thought he'd witness, all 4 of his daughters graduating from medical school with honors. After the ceremony, the girls gathered around Andrew, their faces glowing with accomplishment. Their identical features were lit up with joy, each wearing the same radiant smile he'd grown to love. "Dad, we need to tell you something," Sarah began, squeezing his hand. "We've all received job offers from prestigious hospitals in different cities." Andrew's heart skipped a beat, preparing himself for their departure, but Emma quickly continued, her voice warm and reassuring. "But we're not taking them." "We've decided to stay here," Maria added, her eyes twinkling with excitement. "Remember that empty building on Oak Street? We've already looked into leasing it. It's perfect for what we have in mind." Lucy pulled out a folder filled with carefully drafted plans, the pages crisp and professional. "We're going to open our own family clinic, Dad, right here in our hometown where it all began. We've been planning this for months." Andrew stood speechless, looking at the detailed blueprints and business proposals his daughters had prepared. His hands trembled slightly as he flipped through the pages. The clinic would offer sliding scale fees, ensuring healthcare would be accessible to everyone regardless of their financial situation, just as he had always dreamed. "This was always your dream," Sarah explained softly, wrapping an arm around his waist. "And now it's become ours too. We want to give back to the community that helped raise us, the same community that gave us you." Tears welled in Andrew's eyes as he watched his daughters excitedly discuss their plans, their voices overlapping with enthusiasm. These were no longer the frightened little girls from the orphanage. They had blossomed into confident, compassionate doctors determined to make a difference in people's lives. The small building they chose needed work, but it had potential. Sunlight streamed through the dusty windows as they walked through it together. Each daughter already knew exactly where they would specialize. Sarah in pediatrics, Emma in family medicine, Rachel in internal medicine, and Lucy in psychiatry. Their complementary skills would create a comprehensive care center for the community that had supported them for so long. "Look, Dad," Emma pointed to a spacious corner office, her face bright with anticipation. "This one's yours. You'll be our clinic administrator. We'll need your experience in social work to help us reach those who need us most. We couldn't do this without you." Andrew touched the wall of what would become their family clinic, his fingers tracing the peeling paint that would soon be renewed. His heart was full of pride and gratitude. His unfulfilled dream hadn't died. It had multiplied fourfold in the hearts of his daughters, growing into something far more beautiful than he could have imagined. Word spread quickly about the new family clinic on Oak Street. The waiting room, once empty, now filled with patients drawn by the quadruplets' reputation for excellent care and compassionate service. Andrew managed the front desk with warmth and efficiency, making everyone feel welcome. The walls were decorated with children's artwork from grateful patients, and the gentle hum of conversation filled the bright, welcoming space. One rainy morning, a familiar face walked through the door. Jacob Chen, who years ago had mocked Andrew for adopting the girls, stood dripping in the entrance. His expensive suit was replaced by worn clothes, and his once confident demeanor had given way to something more humble. Dark circles under his eyes told a story of sleepless nights and mounting worries. I lost everything," Jacob mumbled, avoiding Andrew's eyes. "The business went under. I can't afford regular health care anymore. But I heard this place works with people who can't pay much." His fingers nervously played with a frayed thread on his jacket sleeve. Andrew maintained his professional composure, though his heart twinged with memory of that coffee shop conversation years ago. He handed Jake the paperwork without comment, treating him just like any other patient. The clipboard felt heavy with unspoken words between them. Sarah emerged from her office to call the next patient. Her white coat was pristine, her stethoscope draped professionally around her neck. The confidence in her stride spoke of years of dedicated study and practice. Jacob's jaw dropped as he recognized her. You're one of Andrew's girls," he stammered. "You're a doctor now?" His voice carried equal parts surprise and embarrassment. Sarah smiled warmly, every bit the professional. "Yes, all four of us are. We run this clinic together with our father." Her emphasis on the word father was subtle but clear. The pride in her voice matched the determined look in her eyes. Jacob turned to Andrew, his face flushed with shame. "I was wrong about you, Andrew. What I said that day, about you throwing your life away, I couldn't have been more wrong. Look what you've accomplished. Look what they've accomplished. I'm sorry." His words carried the weight of years of regret. Andrew simply nodded, accepting the apology with the same quiet dignity he'd shown all those years ago. "Sarah will take good care of you," he said softly. "She's an excellent doctor." His gentle smile showed no trace of resentment, only the satisfaction of knowing his daughters had exceeded even his greatest hopes. The small clinic that started with just 5 examination rooms soon blossomed into something bigger than Andrew could have imagined. Word spread through the town about the 4 brilliant doctor sisters and their kind-hearted father, who made sure no patient was ever turned away for lack of funds. Within 2 years, they opened a second clinic across town. The expansion meant longer hours and more responsibilities, but the girls tackled each challenge with the same determination they'd shown since childhood. Their reputation for excellence drew patients from neighboring towns, and soon they had waiting lists for appointments. 5 years after opening their first clinic, Andrew stood in front of their newest achievement, a modern hospital that would serve the entire region. The building gleamed in the morning sun, its windows reflecting the sky. Above the entrance, large letters spelled out Miller Family Hospital, honoring the name he had given his daughters. Watching his girls cut the ribbon at the grand opening, Andrew's eyes welled with tears. Each of them had specialized in different areas of medicine, creating a comprehensive care facility that could handle everything from pediatrics to geriatrics. The hospital would provide care to anyone who needed it, regardless of their ability to pay, just as Andrew had always dreamed. Standing in his office one evening, looking at photos of his journey with the girls, from their days in blue dresses at the orphanage to their medical school graduations, Andrew reflected on how life had come full circle. His early struggles, the judgment he'd faced, and every sacrifice he'd made had led to this moment. By choosing to help others instead of pursuing wealth for himself, he'd gained something far more valuable: a loving family and the fulfillment of his lifelong dream to help people through medicine. His daughters found him there, surrounded by memories, and enveloped him in a group hug. "Thank you, Dad," they said in unison, a habit they'd never outgrown. Andrew smiled, knowing that sometimes the best things in life come from giving rather than taking, from loving rather than judging, and from believing in others when no one else would. If you enjoyed the story of Andrew, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.